people really misunderstand um, logic. Okay, what does logic mean? So I was watching a debate between theists and atheists, and the theists were, uh, you know, talking about how Christians reject logic, and in fact, there was a Christian in there rejecting logic, and they were saying, "Oh, well, you have to understand logic." So I interjected, what is logic? Well, as is always the case, people say, well, go to dictionary.com. So I said, okay, well, we can start from that. I don't approve of using the dictionary as a final arbiter of what a philosophical term means, but it's a good starting point. So I got people were cutting and pasting the definition of logic at dictionary.com. The first definition, really no point in going through all of them, is the science that investigates the principles governing correct or reliable inference. I mean, we could have a philosophical discussion about that, specifically because of the use of the word science in there, but that's basically right. It's about these principles governing correct or reliable inference. And I had said that just because you have a logical argument does not mean it's correct, and also that there's nothing inherent in theism to say you can't have a logical argument. Logic is not what is incompatible with theism. But when people cut and paste these quotes and act like I gave you the definition, but did they read the definition? Did they really think about what it meant? I mean, evidently not, because they rejected the idea that a logical argument could be an incorrect one. But they don't understand what logic is. It's about the inferences, okay? So, for example, in the classic syllogism, Socrates is a man, men are mortal, therefore Socrates is mortal. That's a logical argument. What if Socrates is the name of my dog, though? That's still a logical argument. As a matter of fact, even the conclusion would still be correct, that Socrates is mortal. But that argument wouldn't pertain to my dog because he's not a man, and so those are the wrong principles. So what's missing in this argument? I mean, it's logical, but there's an error in it because it says that Socrates is a man. Socrates is actually a dog. What's missing? Is it logic that Socrates is a dog and not a man? No, not at all. That's the input principle. What's missing is empiricism, right? How do I find out if Socrates is a man or a dog? I look at Socrates, I look at him, and I see morphologically, oh, that's a dog. And that's what's missing from theism, is empiricism, because empiricism says go from your senses. But theism believes in metaphysics, which says that there's things that you cannot confirm with your senses that are nevertheless true. That's what's missing from theism. In a logical argument, you have just the structure of how you take ideas and you combine them to get another idea. And that syllogism is true even if the principal input to the syllogism of Socrates being a man is false. What if you had a similar syllogism? Socrates is a man, the offspring of men are humans, therefore Socrates' offspring are humans. Well, in that case, there would be a conclusion, an error in the conclusion, because Socrates' offsprings are dogs, not men, not humans. But the argument would still be logical. Logic is the mathematics of how you combine ideas. It's not if your argument is correct in any other respect other than if the inferences that you make follow from the principles that you put in. Whether those principles are true or not is judged by a different criteria. And as I say, it could be intuitionalism, it could be a lot of things. But if you're a skeptic and you're scientific in that sense, it'll be empiricism. You'll use empiricism. You will test the condition of Socrates to see if he's a man, to see if he's a dog. Okay, so logic is any system of combining these ideas. And the logic we usually mean is a ballad logic, meaning that correct inferences, that we're combining things in a way that doesn't introduce error. And that's what logic does. It takes principles and then it tries not to introduce error. That way, you can have faith that the conclusion follows from the principles. You still need a way to judge the principles, and logic is not going to be the way that you judge those principles. Does this not make, do people get that? Okay? Logic is a very specific thing. It's the grammar of combining ideas. And when you use valid logic, the benefit is that instead of having to judge empirically every single statement in your argument, you pretty much can just judge the principles because you know the logic has not introduced error. So if there's error in your conclusion, it's because there was error in the principles. For example, you've said Socrates was a man when he's really my dog. So, theists can have logical, arguments. I mean, if you take God's existence as a principle, you can derive things from that. But rather than give an example of a theistic argument that's logical but incorrect because the principles are incorrect, I want to just take a second to talk about a theistic argument that is illogical, that a lot of atheists accept as logical. And that is the idea that if God created us, we must worship him. The theory that if someone is your creator, that you have to worship them is not logical because there's no conceptual overlap there. Someone being your creator means that you have to admit they created you. That might be logical. Though maybe not, because we're saying, why would you have to admit? We'd have to have some principles that led. Some of the principles would have to say or imply something about admitting, just as it would have to imply something about worship. But it doesn't. Your parents are your creator. Does that mean you have to worship them? Most people think you should respect them in some sense. Is that logical? I don't know. I haven't seen that argument. It doesn't necessarily follow. I mean, the strongest argument about all this to me is, even if God created the universe, even if something we call God created the universe, it does not mean that I have to worship it. And in fact, I would choose not to.